Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey of My Mother's Son podcast. Today, I'm joined with Taralyn Michelle. Taralyn, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, Dan, thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this. I'm excited.
So am I. So, I want to give a little background before we get going here. So, you're, originally from the Chicagoland area. You're now a mind, body, and spirit coach. Um, and I think when I reached out to you to be on the show, I mean, there was a certain connection about just being real and being organic. And, I love people like that, which is why I wanted to get you on the show. So, you're CEO of Divine Design Media LLC and a published author, really spiritual mind and wellness coach, and you host the Grind to Find podcast. But in your words, before we get started, tell me a little bit more about yourself and, who you are.
Absolutely. Well, as you mentioned, Taralyn Michelle, certified spiritual mindset and wellness coach. And when people say spiritual mindset coach, what does that mean? Well, to be put simply, what I do is I help for people to forge a bond between who they are spiritually and who they show up as in this life. A lot of the times we're going through life and we have a way of functioning that's based on a foundation that was already created, and then we add some bricks of our own to it. By the time you get to me, it's because you understand that the foundation of my belief spiritually, my belief just in this world is not on my own. And I want to erect a foundation that I understand, that I built on my own beliefs and my own truth, and then scale my life spiritually from there. So as a spiritual mindset coach, my job is to help people connect to authentically who they are spiritually and to create the life that they actually want instead of just going on autopilot and accepting what they kind of arrived at, if that makes any sense. And then as a spiritual mindset coach, that's one side. You mentioned that I'm a published author. I'm also a professional writer. So within Divine Design Media LLC, my company, as a coach, I help people navigate the different nuances of their life. And then as a professional ghostwriter, I help them to tell the stories of navigating their life on the other side of that. So I truly love what I do because I feel like we're all walking stories, and I am a storyteller. So it's just amazing to wake up every day and to be involved with so many different souls on this planet. And they choose me to be a part of them straightening out whatever their story is in their life, or even telling that story. And Dan, that's why I was attracted to you. Just learning about your mom and her incredible story and how her story impacted the way in which you decided to take a different journey and road in your life. So it's all about our stories and how we intersect with each other with those stories. So yeah.
I agree. I agree 100%. I love that. So I want to talk a little bit, you mentioned about cleansing the mind, and resetting the negative reel. Tell me a little bit about what that means to reset the negative reel.
Well, I like if anybody who's listening, and I'm pretty sure, Dan, that you can probably relate to this as well. Have you ever been just going about your day? Everything's going great. You could be in your car, store, it doesn't matter. And then all of a sudden, something will flip on in your mind, maybe something from back in the day that you thought you were over. You were not even thinking about it in that moment, but it's like a switch will flip, and all of a sudden, you're thinking about something that was hurtful, painful, and now your mood changes and you don't know how it happened or where it came from. I think many of us can relate to that. And so I often talk about the negative reel that plays in our mind. And what that reel represents is years and years and years of experiences that were emotionally taxing, that just kind of accumulate on this reel in our mind. If you think of an old school reel to reel, the movie reels back in the day. So you have all this negative information that's accumulating over time, things that are embarrassing, things that were hurtful, areas in which you felt slighted, areas in which we judge ourselves. Man, I was stupid that I did that, or maybe I should have responded this way or done things that way. Well, you have the accumulation of all of these different things that just store in your memory. And then what happens is, because those things are unresolved and we judge ourselves because of them, they'll just play at random. Different things in our life, certain places that you go to can trigger a memory that you forgot about, a certain smell, an interaction with a person. So many different things trigger that reel. So when I talk about resetting the foundation of our minds and within our lives, that's what it's all about. It's going to the basis, the foundation of how you created your reel and what are some of the things that just flip on and control your life, control the way in which you think, control the way in which you move, control the way in which you communicate and bond with others, or you can't bond within relationships. So I have an acronym where we start. I actually have several, but the foundation of this is my acronym for fear. And that's dealing with falsehoods emphasized and amplified by regret. And
Wow.
so usually when we're starting at the foundation of that reel within our mind, where we have all of these different things that seem to kind of like on autopilot take over the way in which we think and feel, when we start to address the falsehoods that are emphasized and amplified by things that we regret, then that's the foundation of us getting together to reset the negative reel in your mind so that we can deal with the reality of what is today and not just living off old emotion based on things that really it's just your perception, it's not real.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's important. I mean, because let's face it, our mind does have a strange way of taking us back to places. And that can be good places and bad places. But for some reason, as humans, we like to pick those old scabs a little bit. And, I think is there a way you can get yourself into, training your mind to go back to those good memories as opposed to the bad ones? I mean, is there a way to do that?
That's such an excellent question, Dan. And absolutely there is. The first thing that I always recommend is a lot of the things that a lot of the times we don't like to revisit what didn't feel good. What we do is bury it and we want to get away from it. But I always tell people you want to get away from it because you felt like you had no control at that time. If it was something that you felt like you had the power to change, to fix, or address, why avoid it? You would just get rid of it, right? And so the truth about those things in the past is that whatever we lacked to handle that back then, we're sitting with that memory of something. In a lot of cases, it's over a decade old, right? You're a different person today, and power that you didn't have back then, you actually do have now. So unearthing things that you buried, because anything that you bury, think about if something's buried in the backyard, if it's not buried deep enough with the rain and weather, it's going to come back up. So addressing things from back then, understanding that how you felt about it back then was based on who you were back then, but you're not that same person today. You actually have power and control today to deal with it and move forward. And so I can't stress enough the importance of being present in your now. If there's anything from back then that keeps coming back, it's because it's something that you need to revisit, and knowing that you're capable. You have everything that you need to change how you feel about something that's happened. You can't change what was back then, but you definitely can change the power that it may have over you today.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And then when you talk about cleansing the body, you mentioned purging your temple. So explain a little bit more about that for me.
Oh yes, my body. I consider all of our bodies. They are temples. They not only house our souls, but our temple is everything that we put into it. So we already know that food, things that we put in our mouth and we consume, that's one aspect of it. But touching on what you mentioned earlier about how to get beyond things of the past, anything that we're holding on to is housing space inside of our body. Now, think about this. There are souls inside of this temple, and there's only so much space that that soul occupies. If you're a person who's a believer in that which is greater, whatever that may be for you, I believe in God, then God is always looking to pour into us. He's always looking to pour more of him into us in the form of wisdom, in the form of courage, in the form of love, in the form of belief, in the form of faith. If you think about all the things he wants to pour into us, where the soul has its defined place within our temple, but then we tend to block off every other crevice with fear, hate, uh, anything that you could think of that's negative, embarrassment, some of those us who have social anxiety, some of those apprehensions. If your temple is full of all of these negative things, then there's no orifice for which God can pour in the things that you need to be filled with to keep you free from those things that bind you. So when I talk about cleansing your temple, I'm talking about when you're going through the process of a mindset foundation reset, giving yourself permission to go through the process to remove fear. Now, here's the thing. People say remove fear. Is that something that can happen forever? Well, no. These are all things that come back up. You may have a moment of fear back when you were 7 years old that you're able to remove, but that doesn't mean that when you're 47, you're not going to revisit something else that makes you feel fearful. When you remove things from the past, not only are you getting rid of that thing from the past, but you're acquiring a tool that's going to show you when fear presents itself later on in life. Now you have a tool to deal with it, so you don't deal with it the same way you did when you were 7 or 13 or 21. So it's something that you continue to do throughout the course of life. But as you acquire the tools to clear these different things out of your temple, if you're clearing out the trash, then God can put in his spirit. When you do that, then now when you're faced with fear or situations where there's embarrassment or apprehension, now you have what you need to deal with those things and not allow them to reside and stay in your temple and crowd up space. And then you're able to move on. So that's what I mean by that when I talk about cleansing the temple.
I love that. And then the big one is cleansing the spirit. When you say relinquishing control, which I think is probably one of the most difficult things for human beings to do. Like we want to have control over everything. So expand upon that a little bit for me, because I can't wait to hear this.
Oh man, control. Coming from a control freak myself, control is hard to relinquish. It really is. But I think that it's all about us being truthful about what control has been in our life. How many of us who are control freaks in whatever area you choose can point to a time with even when you dotting every I and crossing every T, something didn't work out in your favor?
Amen.
Everyone. And that's because control is an illusion. It is a mirage. It is not real, And so when we understand the reality, and that is that I don't care how much of our hands we have on a situation, God's will is going to be done. And that will is to elevate us, to make us better, to bring us higher. And so to your question, how to relinquish control? For me, relinquishing control was all about the truth of how my hands on things did not work and giving myself up to what I feel God is pulling me towards. So let me explain what I mean by that. I'll use my situation specifically. When I first decided to, let me scratch that. I didn't decide. What happened was me even leaving corporate America and being an entrepreneur and starting a business. I never saw myself as a business owner. I never saw myself as an author. None of those things were on my list. What happened was I had a traumatic experience in my life that literally destroyed everything as I knew it. And once I didn't have the corporate job anymore, once I was on unemployment, I'm a former indie recording artist. So to make ends meet, I was doing gigs at churches to get paid. And once all of the security that I knew of, because I had the graduate education and had the job and had everything exactly the way it was supposed to be, once all of that was pulled out from under me, I literally had unemployment, a whole lot of venom, and I was mad at God. I was mad at God and I was mad at everything in my life, but I had absolutely nothing else. And in the midst of having nothing, I had a friend of mine that told me, I just want you to know that God told me you're supposed to write a book. How am I not? I don't know how I'm supposed to pay my bills and I'm supposed to stop and write a freaking book. Are you kidding me? This is where it was the furthest thing from my mind. So long story short, I had nothing to lose. No matter what I did, unemployment was all I had, and these side gigs was all I had. One thing I had was time to write a book. I just didn't know what it was supposed to be about or any of that. So this girlfriend connected me to her publisher. They gave me a due date. I missed the due date several times because I'm obedient in the fact that, okay, it wasn't just that she said. It was about a week or so later, I woke up in the middle of the night with it in my chest that, yeah, you're supposed to write this book. I didn't know what it was supposed to be about. Took about maybe a month and a half, 2 months before I went over some old writings that I had, and some of the titles of some of the poetry that I wrote. Each one ended up being a chapter in my book. And so when I got that feeling that I was supposed to write, I just went with it. And when I went with it, here we are now, some years later, and I'm out of corporate America. I have my book. I'm a best-selling author on another one. I have this business. And so when I say led, when we're feeling like we're led to do something, we all have had those things that we think that's just a thought, but it's literally a thought or a presence that you feel that says, hey, Dan, do this, follow in your mom's footsteps. What if you hadn't have listened to that? That wasn't something you planned. You were happy with your life, you and your wife, you were happy with your careers, you were happy with your routine, but something, I believe is God, said, Dan, do this. And if you had any second thoughts, that something was just present. We all have those moments where there's a presence that's guiding us beyond what we understand, what we plan, and what we feel. And so when you allow yourself to submit to your creator and follow it, regardless of what you think, whether you had the money, the time, it's convenient, follow it. Then for every one step we take, he takes two, and life starts to open up. So when I talk about that process, I know it sounds abstract to some people who are not believers, but to those who are, it's one of those kind of things that I'm able to support them through the coaching process. I'm able to find out what that, because we all have that voice. We just brush it off if it doesn't fit into what we think. But when I have them to actually submit, and it's not only about trusting them, because if you hear it, it's because God knows you can do it, but you're also trusting that he's going to fill in the gaps as you move. As Dan, you even learned in your journey. In trusting that, that's how you learn to relinquish control. Because when you follow that, you learn that that's the truth. That's not an illusion. Anything opposite of that, control, is what's not real.
Yeah, and that is so true, because that's exactly what happened to us when we decided to take this leap to, sell all our stuff and, travel around the country in an RV with, not really having a plan, so to speak. So yeah, it's definitely relatable. And I think, there's a lot of people who, like you said, brush that off. And there's a lot of times where sometimes I think you're questioning, all right, where is this voice coming from? Is this my ego talking? Is it,
right?
Is it God talking? Like, where is it coming from? And how do you discern that? How do you figure out, all right, this is just a crazy idea I have, or no, this is something bigger that's speaking to me to take this leap, so to speak.
Phenomenal question. And your example, as well as mine, is the perfect way to support the answer. Anytime you hear that voice, you will know with 100% certainty that it's God when it's in alignment with scripture. And let me tell you what I mean by that. When you decided to sell off your things and you said, hey, we're going to go about this lifestyle that my mom did. Service, selfless service, is in alignment with scripture. That's how you know. God is never going to come and present himself to you and say, hey, go open a brothel and have a team of women that's working for you so you can flip that money. And he's never going to do that, because it's not in alignment with scripture. And so even if you're someone who's not, quote unquote, a believer, if you get a feeling, if you have something that says, hey, I feel like I'm supposed to do this project, or I'm supposed to open this business. All right, well, what type of business is it? How would this business be of benefit to someone other than you? Will you be able to impact on a grander scale, leave a footprint that changes others' lives with your business? So God is always going to come, and he's always going to push you in a direction that aligns with scripture. If you don't know your word and you hear something or feel something, that presence, Go check your word. If you're not someone who's into that, connect yourself with someone. This is the perfect time to maybe stop by an institution or get with someone who's well versed in that and find out, hey, this is what I'm feeling. And I want to know if there's scripture that aligns with it. There's nothing that we experience in this life that's not, if it's of God, in alignment with scripture.
Yeah, no, I love that. And yeah, like I said, I mean, for us, it was, I mean, I didn't embrace it at first. A lot
I
of
bet.
people, when they, when they talk to us now, they think that, we're daring. And, my wife's a little bit more conservative than me, so it took her some convincing as well. But I tell people all the time, it just wasn't her that needed convincing. I mean, I needed to, kind of go through a process as well, and I think, that journey, I mean, and for me, a literal journey now, and really discovering some of the things, as to why my mom did it,
Mhm.
is very, glaring for me. But, for you, it took kind of a rock bottom moment. I think we all have, our different times as to when, you know, we go, oh, okay, that's what you want me to do.
And that's, Dan, that's exactly what it was. It's sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And with me, I was like everybody else. I was just living my life. Somebody told me that success in life meant you grow up, you graduate from college, you get married, you buy a house, you have some kids, the checkbox, you check the boxes. That's what someone told me that life was. That's what success is. And I bought into it. And also too, I bought into it because I had no clue that I didn't know who I was. I thought I knew who I was. I thought that I was making all of these decisions on my own, only for me to get to a certain space where I realized that, hey, I made all of these decisions and I did everything that they say that you're supposed to do to be successful and happy. I checked the boxes. And yet there's this insatiable hunger from within that I can't seem to feed. I'm always left wanting. On paper, I should have been happy. There was no reason why I shouldn't have been happy. But I wasn't. I wasn't. I was unfulfilled and I was just like on autopilot going through my life. And that's when I realized that, is this foundation that you've built your own? Is this all you're doing? Is all of this your idea? What do you really believe?
Yeah.
And so that's where the ultimate release in my book came from. The ultimate release was all about tapping into some spaces to release some things from within, release the indoctrination of what happiness was based on someone else's idealisms, release the idea that what spirituality meant, that was something that was in a box. Every area of my life was a bunch of separate little boxes, but there was no room for Taralyn.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so that's what that thing was like for me. So with you, you had an example and a connection of what this way of being could mean. Even if you didn't understand the depth, because I gather from reading some of your writings, I don't think that you gathered the depth of what your mother was. You observed it from the outside and you saw the impact that she made, but you really didn't get how deep it was and what it took until later. Same thing with me. I didn't get how disconnected I was and how I was living out. I may as well have been in a Tyler Perry play, just playing a role. I wasn't even really living my life, I was playing a role, and so it took for me, God saying, man, the only way that she's even going to come looking for me or see that she's not really even her is if I remove all the distractions. And that's what happened. All of the distractions had to be removed. And that's when it revealed that, hey, you could choose to live. You don't have to exist. And if you want to find out what that is, then come journey with me and maybe I can help show you.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. And I think, it's so obvious, but yet people miss it. I mean, when you see, celebrities that take their own lives or,
Yeah.
end up in addiction and all this stuff. I mean, they've got millions and millions of dollars and, what they think are friends and relationships, but yet there's still something missing, and that alone is reason why the rest of us should be looking and saying, no, you know what, there's more than what society is telling us. There's more than, like you said, checking off those boxes and, you know, doing everything that
Yeah.
they say we're supposed to do. I mean, why do you think it's so difficult for human beings to get it?
I think because we like shiny things.
Yeah.
We live in a day and age where we're inundated with images that tells us what happiness is. And because we get so bogged down in the moment, because let's face it, life is ebbs and flows, it's ups and downs. No one can say at any given time that they're happy all the time. What we can say, if you're blessed, is that overall, I love my life. It's not perfect, but overall, how many people can say overall they love their life? And because that's something that the average person cannot say, and we've been they've created a society, the microwave society. Press a button and it's done. So we're impatient, we're unrealistic, and because we're impatient and unrealistic, introspection is not something people have time for. They're looking for a solution right now. And introspection is a process. That's something that you go through because you understand the benefit is not only going to be, it's not going to be something that you get right now, but when you do get it, it's long term. That's why it takes a while. We don't get into these emotionally disconnected and spiritually depleted places immediately. That happens gradually over time. So then if we're going to try to undo that spiritual bondage, that mindset bondage that we're in, then it stands to reason that that would take time as well.
Right.
So because we quantify everything in terms of time and we're impatient, because we're so busy looking over into our neighbor's yard, well, yeah, I know I got to work on this, but man, they just came back from Mexico and they over in Dubai and man, they just came from Disney World and look at that new car that they bought and oh my God, they upsized their house. And because we're so busy buying into what other people show as external happiness, then we actually unplug and we don't understand that when we're chasing what looks like happiness on the outside, you're never going to really be able to connect to that peace and complacency on the inside. And so that was, I think, one of the most challenging things for me when I was at that space where the destruction and people, destruction for everybody listening, destruction and watching. Destruction is a gift. When God comes and disrupts and destructs and destroys things in your life, that's because he is about to prepare you for something that's even bigger and better. All right. So if you're feeling challenged or down and things are just chaotic in your life, fall to your knees and thank him because something good is coming. But when we have those periods of disruption, that is setting us up to make the choice to do something different. You can continue to do what you've been doing, and that's looking at what you think happiness is, or you can think about life spiritually, and that is in the spirit realm, there's no sense of time. There's no sense of time. You can make the choice to completely and totally connect to where you are and try something different. And if you do that, I guarantee you, you'll be so amazed at, first of all, it doesn't take a lot of time. It really doesn't. It has to do with what you're willing to do, but it doesn't take a lot of time. And if I'm going to make any moves from within, I want moves that are going to be sustainable long term. I don't want to be happy for 6 months and then I'm right back where I was for the last 15 years.
Been there, done that, right?
Exactly. I'm not trying to, and I'm not getting any younger. Okay. It's not like I call the 20s the lost decade. It's not like you can go through the lost decade, keep hitting reset and still come out and look young and feel young and everything when you hit your 30s. That doesn't happen when you get in your 40s and 50s. And no, we don't have that kind of time. We don't. So, but yeah, I think that just embracing that disruption and understanding that disruption is not always against us. It's not something that's meant for us to fail. Actually, disruption is something that's meant to grab our attention and to get us to understand that you have limited yourself in the space that you're in, which is why you feel stressed, which is why you feel overwhelmed, which is why you're left wanting. This is the reason why these things are happening, and destruction and disruption, the opportunity to do something completely and totally different.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw something on the internet, over and over again, or I forget the entire quote, but at the end it was basically, some storms come to clear your path. And that, I think that
Yes.
really is, very relative to what we're talking about. And, you know, and there's so many times, now, um, it's funny, it's difficult to always look forward, but when you reflect, you can kind of connect those dots and be like, wow, this time that was like what I felt was one of the most traumatizing times of my life was actually clearing the path for me to do this, and it's a shame. I mean, it's just humanity. It is what it is. We don't have a crystal ball to look in the future, but I think the more that you can reflect and connect those dots, it makes you more appreciative of those times. And like you said, you have
Yeah.
the mountains and valleys, but if overall, you can look back and say, what, I've got a pretty good life. I've been very blessed and very fortunate. I think you're ahead of the curve at that point for sure.
Ooh, I love all of that. Yes. First of all, the connecting the dots, that is so huge because that's what my book, The Ultimate Release, ended up being about. I didn't speak about any of that in the book, but once the book was finished, like I told you, I wouldn't write no book. I didn't know, I was like, I have no clue what's going on here, what I'm doing, how this is supposed to happen. And when I finished the book, I thought the book meant one thing. It took a couple years later for me to actually go back and read the book and to realize that God's purpose with that project was for me to stop making it through a certain moment and then forgetting about it and moving on to the next thing. No, 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 no. Every moment serves as a piece to a larger picture of your life. That book was about connecting the dots of everything that I've learned to form a larger picture. And that's what we should be doing going throughout life. So when you said that, completely and totally resonated with me because it's so very important. And then you said another thing that's super huge, and that is gratitude for what it is that we have. If we can't appreciate what we have from where we've come, what's going on right now. Let's say you have a really chaotic moment. It could be someone who has a terminal illness that you love. It could be your home being foreclosed on. It could be some folks having COVID and you don't know what's going on with that. It could be a challenging situation with custody with children. It could be a job situation, you name it. We have a lot of things going on now, right? Even in the midst of all of those things going on, there are things to be grateful for. There are things that show that God is present. None of us are going to have everything perfect, but we can't get to this grandiose idea of what we want our life to be if we can't give thanks for where we are right now, even when things are challenging. So that was a super important point.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes, at least in my life, there have been some times where, um, you know, God will give us those reminders, like, hey, just because what you think you're going through is really bad, um, it could be a lot worse, And I remember specifically one time, myself and a colleague had just left a meeting that was a really demoralizing meeting for us and for our
Mm,
organization. And we're heading back to our office, and we get to a traffic light, and there's a guy in the corner with no arms, no legs, just sitting there. And
mm,
we just looked at each other and like, what, I guess that meeting really wasn't all that bad when you think about it. It kind of just gave us a
right.
new perspective of,
Yeah.
what, um, the sun's still going to come up tomorrow, and I think what it was, the guy sitting there in the corner was smiling, like he was smiling, and it was just kind of a, boom. Um, you know what? If he can smile through whatever he went through, we can get through what we're going through right now. And yeah, so it's just a matter of perspective of really, understanding. And I know it's tough when you're in the storm,
Yeah.
um, to do that, but you have to figure it out. You have to figure it out in that moment that, what, this is going to pass. And, I don't know why I'm going through it, but it's going to get better. And, you know, maybe it'll be a couple years till I understand it, but at some point I will understand it, So
Yeah,
and again, it really comes down to perspective, I think, to have that understanding.
a
You know?
100%. And then also too, keeping in mind that we're not being victimized by life. Not everything that happens to us is not meant to be for us. Most things that happen to us are actually meant to be for us. Again, when you say perspective, that's so important because all of the things that I thought that was happening to me when my life completely and totally fell apart, they're all actually for me. I can see that now.
Right.
I couldn't be where I am today if all of those things were not destroyed. They had to be. And it was not just about the thing. I think that's just in saying that, that's the biggest thing that I learned. My focus was on external things to be successful and to make me happy. Certain title, certain place I live, and I've never been a materialistic person. You wasn't gonna go around my house and see a bunch of labels of this and that. I never valued that. And so because my mindset and perception of materialism was in a box, well, it's only if you're running around looking for different labels of this and that. To me, that's what materialism was. It took me understanding that anytime you place your happiness in this world, or anytime you make it attached to anything outside of yourself and God, that's materialism. That's idolatry. And it could be anything. And so when you use the word idolatry, people are like, but it's true. To your point earlier, when you mentioned the rich people killing themselves, strung out on drugs, and all of these ridiculous, they can go anywhere, buy anything, do anything. They have the lives that most of the world believes that they want. Yet they're some of the most unhappy people that you would ever see. And the reason being is because we were created to be of service. We were created to be a community. Many of them who are rich like that, they're all into themselves, and that leaves you vacant and void on the inside. They have everything to cover them with their wants on the outside, but spiritually, they're bankrupt and they don't have a lot of what they need.
Yeah.
Spiritually. And that's where that comes from. And so you're, to your point about just being present and understanding that, yeah, things are tough. You're not going to know why now, but I would add to that, don't take on the mindset that these things are happening to you. Instead, look from the perspective of, okay, this has to be happening for me. What am I meant to learn from this? How am I going to become, if refinement is rough, and if your patch is rough right now, you're being refined. How is God using this to elevate me? What am I supposed to learn from this? How can I take this situation that I'm in that's completely and totally challenging in this way and use this experience to elevate, if it's not me, even somebody else, or sometimes sharing a lot of what we're going through. We've become so super private. Remember back in the day when the women would do Tupperware at each other's houses and they'd share what was going on, and it was that communal aspect. So they're sharing the brunt of some of their burdens, so one person's not carrying it on their own. And then you open yourself up to other ways of thinking, probably solutions or even just comfort. We become embarrassed and we'll just hold so many things in that are tight for us. I had a cousin that hid the fact that he had a cancer diagnosis, and everybody found out when he only had a few months to live. We were devastated. We could have supported you. We could have been there for you, but it just blew my mind. That's why I say he just had to be sick. Who would hide a cancer diagnosis? It's not like it's something you did wrong, but we hide things that we should let others know for support, but then put a bunch of things out there on social media that we should be embarrassed about. It's backwards. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things, if there's a silver lining throughout COVID, it's that, even though through technology, we are quote unquote more connected than we were, probably when you and I grew up, but it's an artificial connection. It's not that real human connection. And I think during COVID, when we were stripped of that human connection for, some time, people really started saying, wait, you know what? Yeah, I'm introverted, but I actually do like people, at least the people in my tribe. And to have
Yes.
that stripped, I think it gave us a little bit greater appreciation of that human connection. And, what it's like to not have it. And, I hope, it seems like, again, as humans, we are quick to forget some of those things. And, as the further and further as, we put COVID behind us and put quarantine behind us and all that sort of stuff, I hope we've learned from that to understand that, yes, that true human connection, you don't even have to go and pay a therapist, but if you just talk to
Yes.
people, and just have a conversation, and a real conversation, not just a conversation as to what you can get out of the person you're talking to, or vice versa. I mean, that was one of the things, I had hated whenever we'd go to, networking events and stuff like that. It just seemed so fake to me, but yet when you did find that one person in the room who you had that connection with, it was like, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Someone
genuine.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So
yeah, I agree with you. Those can always be uncomfortable situations when you, like you say, there are a whole bunch of agendas and not people there really to just connect authentically with other people. So yeah, I agree.
Right. So we're just about out of time. And anything you want to talk about that we didn't? I mean, I could probably go on and talk to you for 2 or 3 hours, but I don't know that our listeners would stay in for that long. But anything that we missed that you want to talk about?
I think we covered all of the bases. I think the only thing that I would add is that there are always going to be challenging times. We can't change that. And actually, I don't think we really want to. The challenging times serve a divine purpose. It's all in how you choose to look at it. So welcome the challenges and pray for what you're supposed to learn from them. Don't be afraid of things being out of our control. Since control is the ultimate. I think that's all I would say.
Yeah. And I think that's when you talk about praying, I think changing the way we pray as well. Because, when I was younger, it was always like, I want this, I want that, give me this, give me that. And now it's really kind of, again, changing that perspective of, Lord, show me what you want me to do. What is your will? Because I know my will and your will certainly clash sometimes, and let me accept your will. And I think that goes back to, one of your first points of giving up control. Is just say, look, what is your will throughout this situation? What do you want me to do? And so I think praying is one thing, but I think, praying with the correct perspective is a totally different thing. Sure. So how can if anybody wants to reach out to you, use your services, get your book, how can they get a hold of Taralyn?
Absolutely. You can go to taralynmichelle.com, and from there you can link to my podcast and everything, books, everything that's going on with me, taralynmichelle.com.
Awesome. So as you know, I do ask all my guests a final question. And that comes from the opening lyrics of a song by Michael Franti. The song is Gloria, and the opening lyrics go, when many little people in many little places do many little things and the whole world changes. So it's one of the little things that Taralyn does on a daily basis to make the world a little bit better place.
I just smile. I really do. And I know it sounds hokey, but I have noticed that if I'm just going into the grocery store or anything, when you look at people and smile, you immediately get a smile back. If you walk past people and you're expressionless, then they remain expressionless. So literally, it's what I'm doing.
Love that. And you're not the only one who's given me that answer. And I love that answer because it is such a small thing that can make such a big difference in someone else's life. Because again, you have no idea what that person is going through in that moment. And your smile just changed the entire trajectory of their day at that point. So I love that. That is huge, and it fits perfect with the subtitle of the podcast for sure. So Taralyn, I really appreciate you taking the time and having the conversation with me. For folks out there listening, be sure to check out my other podcasts and blogs at danclouser.com. And be sure to head over to Amazon, pick up a copy of the latest book, The Journey of My Mother's Son, Volume 1. Taralyn, thanks again for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Dan. My pleasure.
Yeah.